Hello once again. I am, as everybody knows by now, back from the Hot Rod Power Tour, and I think I finally pretty much got caught up on everything that I didn't get done on the weeks before the tour and the week that I was on the tour. Uh, Gotten most of the other stuff taken care of. So now it's time to get back on the 68 Mustang. Now, if you weren't following that before, there's a link to the whole playlist up there, how it started, what was going on. Uh, Long story short, was supposed to go on the tour, didn't go on the tour. So now I'm going to see if I can get the car on the road and drivable. That was kind of my goal for the tour. It didn't work out. Uh, I'm going to see if maybe I can make Mustang Week this year with the car. One of the things that I had to do was the transmission tunnel has been chopped up by something that slightly resembles a metal-eating beaver. It was pretty jagged and ragged. So what I did was I cut a section out of the transmission tunnel and fabricated another piece of steel and welded that in there. I got a little bit more cleanup to do work on the welds, but it was something that was trying to get it taken care of. Gonna get that in so I can get it all in there while I have the motor out. And this part was easy. Used a piece of cardstock to draw some lines around the mangled metal. Once I get the motor out, I'll cut it all out with a cutoff wheel. Unfortunately, that started another project because I didn't want to take the distributor and the carburetor and all the other stuff off, and the engine lift mount that I had, the chains would have just pulverized the plastic distributor cap and made a complete and total mess of an aluminum carburetor. So took a couple pieces of square stock that I had sitting around the garage, welded a few hooks to them, and created a device that I can use to attach to the front and the back of the motor so I can use the load leveler a little more effectively, and it keeps the chains away from all of the components on the motor. I'm fairly confident that the square stock is going to hold up. I'm not really worried about that. I guess the only point of failure in this will be the actual hooks, because I'm not real sure what quality metal that is. It doesn't seem all that good. The welds will not break, though. And having complete confidence that nothing was going to break, and the motor was not going to come crashing onto the garage floor, breaking both the floor and damaging something on the motor, I hooked it all up and pulled it out of the Mustang for, oh god, I don't know, the 575th time, maybe? Got everything unhooked, got everything leveled up, and then pulled the motor and transmission out as a unit. Notice there's no radiator support in this car, and I don't plan on welding one in. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to bolt one in. I'm going to have to create a couple of brackets to help make sure everything is nice and sturdy and solid, but I expect that I'm going to be pulling motors in and out of this car frequently enough while I'm working on the turbo system that I just don't want to be bothered with a firewall. So if I can work with a bolt-in one, I'm going to. And with the transmission tunnel marked and the motor and transmission out, I went through and cut out all of the mangled, bent, and destroyed metal. Took the piece I cut out, used it as a template on a piece of 16 gauge steel, squared up the corners, and then a combination of a couple of metalworking tools to get it into some semblance of a transmission tunnel shape. Not part of aforementioned metalworking tools, but you'd be surprised what you can do with a hammer and a dolly. And with a reasonably good fit, went through, marked out the transmission tunnel for the final time to cut out. I have just found that it is easier to fabricate the piece and then cut out a little extra than it is to try and fabricate a precise piece and fit it in. I'm just not that good at metalworking. But once I had everything cut out, cleaned it up with the angle grinder, and then finished trimming the transmission tunnel where the shifter was going to come to the top. I want to be able to do anything I need to do from above without having to worry about crawling underneath and raising transmissions or dropping transmissions and stuff like that. And then it's welding time. And then a lot of small, short, tiny little welds. Do it easier this way to control the distortion and the heat to prevent warpage. It makes a little bit more of a cleanup because you don't get one nice smooth bead, but a lot easier on the metal. and a little bit of time with an angle grinder and some flat disc to clean it up. While I had the motor out, I went ahead and put the separator plate back on and all of the clutch components, torqued the flywheel bolts down to spec, finished putting the motor together, got the starter bolted on. I used all new hardware, originally been kind of reusing some of the stuff that was on the motor originally. The flywheel went on with a combination of thread lock and a 3-step torque sequence. I started out at 35, did a sequence at 35, had them all torqued there, then moved to 55, and then went to 85. I was actually able to get the first 2 steps done with little problem. There was just enough compression that didn't have to worry about it. But the step 3 was when I discovered I needed longer arms. Once the flywheel was on, I put together the rest of the clutch components, then put the transmission back on. I'm actually pretty fortunate that the T5 is not heavier than it is, because I was able to, by myself, get it lined up and get all the hardware started. And it was this stage when I realized I didn't have all of the hardware I needed, so I had to put the old stuff back in until I could get to the hardware store. And one of the last things that I worked on while the motor was out was getting a bracket fabricated for the cable clutch system. The car has a power booster for brakes in it now, wasn't there before, and the standard clutch mechanism wasn't going to work. So what I did was I took a cable out of a 94 Mustang GT, which just happened to be conveniently sitting in my yard over there, and made it so that I could put a factory 94 cable and up into this car with little modifications. So basically just made a bracket that sits underneath the pinch weld at the top of the firewall, and that holds the place and thing, and that matches up with the clutch quadrant that I kind of fabricated and welded up. So I've got a nice smooth radius, everything is clear of all the metals, and it looks like it's going to work. Once I got it back in, I gave it a couple of test runs to see if it's going to fit. I'm optimistic. I think it's going to work. I used steel for this one as well. Drew a rough template with the cardboard, and then just a combination of back and forth until I had everything lined up. Once I had the piece that fit where I needed to, drill a hole so that the connector where it runs to the firewall can do, and then put a couple inserts in there so that I can thread it in there and lock that in place. Then drill down through the pinch weld at the top in 2 places and put inserts in there too. And so that bracket sits underneath the brake booster and attaches to the firewall. It's 16 gauge steel, and with it bent like that, it's plenty sturdy. It's not going anywhere. There's no movement in that when I wanted to press the clutch. And after numerous test fits, and I was content that it was functioning properly, gave it a quick sand for some paint and cleaned it up with some acetone. Then threw a couple of coats of primer on it and a couple of coats of, yes, you guessed it, satin black enamel. And there we go. A little bit more done on the project that was supposed to make it on the tour but didn't. Hoping to be able to get a little bit done on the car every week like I was before the tour. I don't know if there'll be Mustang Mondays, because they may not be Mondays. It may be Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Mustang Wednesday just doesn't have the same ring. But going to try and get a little bit more stuff done. I'll post occasional updates. I think for now I'm going to forego getting the turbo mounted and just get the car on the road. Once I have the car on the road and drivable, then I will tackle the turbo system, and I've got to make a decision if I'm going blow through carb or fuel injection. Have a great week.